Welcome into episode 3 of Bloops and Barrels, a Big Ten softball podcast. Ethan Siegel and Adam Beck. And Adam, we are really making progress into this softball season. Already 3 weeks in, it's going by fast. We had another fun weekend of softball, including at the Mary Nutter Classic, and a lot of big results to break down. Have an exciting show today. Going to do some stock up, stock down, some X factors, and then always, as per usual, talk about our favorite things we saw around the Big Ten this week. But first, how you doing tonight? Any initial impressions now that we're 3 weeks into the ball season?
I think this weekend frustrated me, and I think it frustrated you as well. Mostly because most of the games that I wanted to watch were on Flow Sports, and I did not feel like spending $15 on a Flow Sports account. So it was a lot of catch up, it was a lot of trying to figure out what happened, but feel like I have a really good understanding of what went down this weekend. But these games just need to be like way more accessible, and especially like these high level early season games. Like, come on.
I will say, even if you were someone who spent the money to watch on Flow Sports, I'll say it outright, is a terrible service that consistently doesn't work. So yeah, I'm totally with you. Definitely a frustrating weekend at times, but that's certainly not the teams or the players or the coaches' fault. So they've given us plenty to talk about, even if it is definitely carrying out a little bit more in box score and stat watching than usual. I like to be able to, really sit down and watch a full game of weekends, and that wasn't always the case this weekend. So definitely agree with that frustration. But no matter what, we had 17 teams in the Big Ten play a bunch of games this weekend, and let's start with some stock up, stock down. And I want to start with stock up, and I think we're in lockstep. Maybe I'm making more editing work for you right now by saying this, Adam, but if we could rerun that clip where last week I said, watch out for Penn State. I think next week on this podcast, we're going to be talking about Penn State. I think I'm completely vindicated. An awesome weekend for the Nittany Lions. They went 5-0 down in Orlando this past weekend, including a win against a very good Central Florida team, a big win over Notre Dame, 2 wins against Charleston Southern, and a win against Ohio. Where do you want to start with this Nittany Lions squad that now sits at 13-2 on the season?
I love how well-rounded this team is. And the pitching is fantastic. The offense is great too. I mean, they've got 4 hitters with an OPS above 1,000, 5 hitters above 980 in terms of OPS. They scored a ton of runs, third most runs in the Big Ten. They steal bases, 25 stolen bases, the second most in the Big Ten. And it's not like they really rely on the long ball all that much. Just 20 home runs in the season, which is more or less middle of the pack in the conference. This is a team that has so many hitters, so many dynamic options, and they're beating you with small ball. Like it's consistent, it's steady, and more importantly, it's sustainable. And then the pitching as well. I mean, the best ERA in the conference, best batting average against. They're allowing weak contact. They're getting, outs because of that. They're not really going to strike a ton of batters out. And they've got 5 really dominant pitchers who have been really solid throughout the season so far. So I just think that there's depth, there's steadiness, they're top down. This is a team that is right now in the middle of the Big Ten in terms of like power rankings. But at a team that is 13-2 now, 9 game winning streak. They're now a top 25 team in the country. They're moving up those power rankings really, really quickly.
I think I might be even more bullish on them than you are, Adam. I mean, they moved up to number 24 in the Softball America rankings that came out earlier today, and I think they're right there near the top of tier 2 of the Big Ten. And yeah, you mentioned the pitchers, 5 pitchers who are all playing well. And something that's really impressed me, they've won in a variety of different ways with offense, at times with the small ball, at times. They have 52 extra base hits in 15 games, which is really exciting. They've won with defense and dominant pitching. They've won in some blowouts. They've already had a handful of comebacks this year. And I think the thing that really stands out to me is there's maybe no team in the conference who's getting more from freshmen across the board. Uh, I think you have to look at Brianna Hannock, who's already hitting really well, Kirsten Finarelli, who's hitting 333 already in the season, and then, of course, you have to talk about Allison Oneacre, who is just awarded her second consecutive Big Ten Freshman of the Week award, already 7 home runs and 27 runs batted in, which is second in the conference between, I mean, we'll get to that later in the episode, I'm sure, but there's some absolutely wild things happening down at UCLA, but Allison Oneacre is right there, right behind. And it's just a team. They steal a lot of bases. They're walking a ton. As I mentioned, winning in different ways, a good defense. And I think people forget that this was a really good Penn State offense last year, one that broke a bunch of program records. And now you get Bridget Namath back. You have 4 other pitchers who have looked really good so far. And I don't know. You take on number one Tennessee this upcoming week, and I'm excited to see if they can give a battle. And when I mentioned the freshmen, I really wasn't even including some of the freshman pitchers who have been so good, including Mackenzie Duncan, the freshman, who leads all Big Ten eligible pitchers in batting average against and is second in strikeouts per 7 innings. Like there is so much to be excited about. And Brevin Kellapore is 0.71 ERA in 20 innings already. Like I'm just really excited about this Penn State team. I think anyone who's listened to the podcast has probably started to see I've kind of adopted them maybe as my team to watch all year, and they have a really favorable Big Ten schedule when we get into that. So I think this is a team that we'll be hearing a lot from this Big Ten season.
And I think this weekend's really interesting with those matchups against Tennessee because they have played some real teams so far this year. They beat Missouri in the opening weekend of the season. They lost a close one to Auburn, which is another team that's kind of in that top 25 mix. But in terms of like consistent top 25 competition, we haven't quite seen that yet. So that's why I'm really looking forward to this weekend. See how they battle against the best team in the country.
And on the other side, in the theme of, maybe doing a bit of a deeper dive into some teams that we haven't talked about quite as much on the podcast, stock down, unfortunately, for the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers, who fall to 7-7 on the season after going 2-3 this past weekend, including some losses to Cal State Fullerton, to LMU, a very good LMU team, I will say, and a one-run loss to Utah. Not counted in that was getting smoked by the Japanese team in an exhibition, which is a really cool thing that happened. But where do you want to start with Rutgers? Why have things gone wrong? Why did they make our stock down this week?
They don't really have that much offense. I think Addie Osborne's a super exciting player to watch. She hit about 350 this weekend, had a home run, but there's just not enough consistent bats in the lineup. I mean, they've got two qualified hitters that are batting below 150. That it's just not a recipe for success. In this era of college softball, and especially in a loaded Big Ten, where there's so much parity. But this is an offense that's last in the Big Ten in average. They're bottom third in slugging, bottom third in runs scored. 15% of their runs this season came in their weekend finale win against UC San Diego. They won 10-3. That was 15% of their runs on the entire year in 14 games. So from an offensive perspective, not super high on them. And then pitching wise, like Kelly Hoekstra has been awesome so far this year. 1.58 ERA, 106 WHIP, but outside of that, nothing. There's not another capable or consistent arm on this team. And it's meant that the pitching overall has been pretty middle of the pack. You've got some really good top end stuff with Hoekstra, but the back end of the bullpen has not been able to deliver. There's just not enough on this team with some of the high end talent that I think it means that this team is going to struggle when we get into conference play.
I think you're right, and it's totally the offense. 29 extra base hits in 14 games so far. They're last in the Big Ten in batting average, and I think the thing that sticks out is they hit neither for average nor power, and they're just not a team that so far has been making up for it with walks or stolen bases. They're middle of the pack or towards the bottom of the conference rankings in both of those categories. And I mentioned Penn State having a really favorable Big Ten schedule. It's the exact opposite for Rutgers. They have to play both UCLA and Nebraska, which I think for both of our money are the two best teams in the conference. And then they play Penn State, they play Indiana in the series, and those are some of those tier 2 teams that have played really well early on. And so Rutgers is a team that I'm watching to make sure things aren't spiraling out of control as we start to get closer and closer to Big Ten play. We're inching toward March, Adam. It's getting nearer and nearer. But with that, let's go into some individual players. So far on this podcast this season, we've talked a lot of teams, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper and let's talk about some individual X factors for the rest of the season, whether that be coaches, whether that be players. We're both going to count down our top 3 X factors across the conference. We have not shared these lists with each other. So, Adam, why don't you go ahead and start with your number 3 X factor?
So for me at number 3 right now, and I take X factors a little bit more broadly. It is player based. I think it's a lot of storyline based as well. So we're gonna talk about the pitching behind Lyndsey Grein at Oregon, specifically Elise Sokolsky. They've got a couple other pitchers there in Matty Milhorn and Taylor Spencer that I think are really important to what Oregon's trying to do. But Sokolsky specifically is a huge X factor for that team. And specifically, we saw it last year with how productive Grein was as that front-end starter. Sokolsky would come into games late and be super productive as well. But frankly, she's been pretty poor to start the year. And I think it's a big reason why Oregon has struggled. Grein stats have been more or less pretty comparable to last year. ERA is in a similar place. The strikeout numbers are in a similar place. But Sokolsky's ERA is taken a little bit higher. And the biggest difference for her has been her inability to control the strike zone. And that's been a huge case in wins versus losses. In losses, her whip, her walks and hits per inning pitched is near 2. It's 1.9. And that's incredibly concerning. But a 1.73 whip overall compared to a 1.10 whip from last year, she's got to be able to control the strike zone better because with the amount of pitching and the amount of innings that she's going to have to eat, especially as we get into Big Ten play, she's so important to what Oregon needs to do, especially to keep Lyndsey Grein fresh. They can get some production from Maddie Melhorn, some production from Taylor Spencer, also important. They've pitched their fair share. Spencer's over 20 innings. Milhorn's at 16 2/3, and both of them have shined at times, but they need Sokolsky to be at her A game if Oregon wants to be anywhere near where we were talking about that at the beginning of the season.
Well, it's fascinating that you went to the Ducks for your number 3 X factor because I did also, but on the other side of the ball, and I kind of cheated. I'm choosing a triumvirate of players. Let's just talk about Oregon's struggles, and it has not been the Ducks team that we saw last year. And I'm going to pinpoint Rylee McCoy, Flannery, Stefini Mayake, all really slow starts to the season. Last year, that is a trio of players that combined for 44 home runs, including Rylee McCoy, who hit 385. So far this season, Rylee McCoy is just 1 for 29 at the plate. Flannery's hitting a little better at 243, Mayake at 136, and they've combined for a singular home run so far this season and 12 walks to 17 strikeouts. And so as much as you can pinpoint maybe the depth behind Lyndsey Grein is a potential weakness for this Oregon team, Lyndsey Grein is probably going to be starting 2 games a weekend for the better part of this Big Ten slate, which gives you a chance to win those games. But ultimately, the thing that is most different from last year's Oregon team to this year's Oregon team is there have just been random offensive clunkers, some low-scoring affairs where Oregon's offense just hasn't showed up. And last year, it felt like it was just bombs away in Eugene. They were maybe the most fun team to watch in the conference. And so far, there have been some early frustrations and early struggles. So it's only a matter of time, I feel like, until some of these bats start to get going, but it needs to happen fast.
Ethan, I'm honestly surprised that that's number 3 for you because something similar is brewing there just a little bit later in the list for me. I think that is arguably the biggest storyline in the conference right now.
I think I'm willing to say right now that I think there's a real argument that Oregon is closer maybe into tier 2 of that next tier than they are right now to Nebraska and UCLA at the top.
Absolutely. Just with how up and down. I think this weekend was a really big weekend for them getting a couple big wins. Just like some confidence of, hey,
They have been the hardest team to get a grasp on by far. You lose 3-7 to Cal State Fullerton. You lose to Auburn, but then you go out and you beat a really good Texas A&M team with pitching, a really good South Carolina team with pitching, but you score just 2 runs in both of those games. And then the pitching doesn't show up against Duke, but the offense explodes for 11 runs. They've just been a bizarre team so far 3 weeks into the season, and I'm waiting for some things to standardize so I can get a grasp of what to make of the Ducks.
We'll keep chatting about them in a little bit. For me, for number 2,
2 Ducks in your wow. Okay.
oh, come on. I feel like we haven't talked about the Ducks enough on this podcast through 3 weeks. I had to double dip. I'll save them to number 1. My number 2 X factor though is Indiana's speed for its offense. And specifically, I mean, we know Indiana, like the offense was one of the best in the Big Ten last year. They led the conference in average. It's all about the pitching. Do they have enough pitching? But I'm not a fan of pitching. Like I don't want to talk about pitching. Like that's just
So it's the guy who just talked about a pitcher for his number 3.
okay. But that was important for number 3. But when I'm like, when I'm passionate, when I'm trying to get into it, we're talking offense, and I think Indiana's speed makes this offense special. Right now, they're tied for first in the Big Ten in batting average, up there with UCLA. They scored the second most runs in the Big Ten, and they walk a good amount too. But because they're able to get extra base hits, specifically triples, which they lead the Big Ten in, and they lead the Big Ten in stolen bases, I think that element of their offense is what stands out. That's what makes them tick. Aly VanBrandt is probably the cornerstone of all that. Leads the Big Ten in triples. She's got 4 of them. Leads the Big Ten in stolen bases with 10. I think her ability to impact the game in so many ways with her speed is a game changer for this Indiana offense. And then you've got Alex Cooper in there. You got
Wait, I'm going to cut you off in real time because I want to do a Bloops and Barrels prop bet right now. By the end of the season, Indiana, I think we both will agree, they're going to lead the Big Ten in stolen bases.
Oh,
How
100%.
many more stolen bases will they have than the second highest team in that mark? I want to see if we can pick a number that we disagree on, a certain over under. Like what does your gut say? They'll have X many more than. I'm kind of assuming it's going to be maybe Penn State or Northwestern as the teams who are kind of Purdue as
I
well could be in the
think
mix.
probably in like my gut is in like the 40-ish range.
Okay, mine was high 30s, so we're
Okay.
in a similar spot
We're
actually.
we're in a similar spot. Okay, so if I said like 3.5, or are you taking the under?
No, let's do 39 and a half. Like, does it start with a four?
Okay, I'll take the over because
Cool.
that's where my gut was.
I'll take the under, but we're in the same ballpark. Go on, anyways.
Anyway, I just think that their speed and their ability to hit for contact and get on base means that offense is sustainable. And we saw it all of last year, and I think it's right back again this year. And it's all starts with their athleticism, and their ability to, impact the games with their ability on the base paths.
I will say I definitely thought about doing an Indiana one, and I would have taken the bait for the pitchers. This I'd say would be an honorable mention because, like you said, the offense rocks. The speed is a huge part of that. And for me, between Aubrey Hooks and Ella Trout and Taylor Hess and Brooke Mannon, if they can have one of them prove themselves as a true two-time a weekend starter, can eat 10 to 11 innings, then they move from a team that could be really frisky to a team who's actually worth considering on the national stage. But for my number two, let's go to Nebraska and let's talk a little bit about Ava Cusack, who last year hit 412, almost a 1400 OPS, 21 home runs. So far, totally fine, a very pedestrian, roughly 250 batting average. And I just think Ava Cusack is so often overshadowed by Jordy Fromm. And Ava Cusack is the cleanup hitter for this team. And right now she is hitting directly after Jesse Farrell. And obviously you can talk about how important Cusack is as a defensive player for Nebraska as well. But in terms of thinking about X factors, I really wanted to talk about, I was less interested in just who's going to be the second pitcher behind this and who are the players who can determine whether a team is really good versus actually great, because the Big Ten is a not the premier softball conference, but there are certainly a few teams who have very large aspirations this season, and Nebraska is certainly one of them. And I think you know what you're going to be getting from Jordy Fromm, and actually I'm pretty excited. I feel like we know what we're going to be getting from Alexis Jensen, and I didn't want to talk about second pitchers as I mentioned. So Ava Cusack was the name that if you're getting the last season Ava Cusack above 400 plus just the way that all of these Nebraska bats have been alive, I really just see Nebraska as a team that, yes, they've been working out some kinks. They've been inconsistent, but they're a de facto top 7 or 8 team in the country if Ava Cusack is hitting 400 with Jordy Fromm hitting leadoff, also hitting 400.
Yeah, I mean the team has so many bats. They've got so much talent. I think Kuzak, she started a little bit slowly, as you mentioned. The numbers have ticked up slightly, but I mean she is a player with so much pop in her bat, and when she gets going, that Nebraska offense is even more unstoppable than it has already been at times this season. Sticking with the offense and kind of going back to the Ducks, for me, it's just all about the power. And you hit on this a little bit earlier, but for me, this is just a glaring. This is the biggest storyline in the Big Ten right now, outside of
I can't
Nebraska.
believe you went with two Ducks
Oh, come
storylines in
on.
your top three X
Come
factors.
on. That's what this team is right now. Like it's concerning. I mean, you're mentioning I don't know how to rank them. They're 8-6. They went 3-2 this past weekend. They did pick up a really nice win against Texas
Well,
A&M, South
let's be
Carolina.
clear. Like both of us were in agreement going into this season. We would have ranked Oregon number 1 in the conference. And the fact that we are saying they are firmly number 3 and might be dropping soon into that 4-5 range, if you're a Ducks fan, you have to be feeling a little nervous.
But it's not because the talent isn't there. It's just the
No,
power. The power hasn't been there. Like this team hit 86 home runs last year, and through 3 weekends, they have 8 homers. This past weekend, they just like didn't really hit the long ball. Like it's unbelievable. Only one game this season with multiple home runs. This past weekend just had 3 home runs on the entire weekend. And really, what's been concerning for me is Elon Butler coming in from Cal, who over the past 3 seasons, 37 homers. Well, she's just got 2. You talked about Stefini Maka. You talked about Rylee McCoy a little bit. They need to get going as well. Um, yeah, they got to figure out the bats, man. I don't know if it's something in the balls this year. Maybe they're just not flying as much. Maybe the bats aren't. They gotta wake up.
I mean, assuming it's a standard regulation ball, that's certainly not true because look what UCLA is doing right
No,
now.
it's true. It's true. I don't know.
But before I go to my number 1, any other honorable mentions that you consider or want to shout out?
Yeah, I'm gonna shout out. This is kind of a weird X factor, but I think maybe working backwards a little bit, almost like an un-X factor, like something that could derail a team, is having no home field advantage for Northwestern. And then playing, their home games in Rosemont, Illinois, with the J currently under renovation. Last year was a little bit of a tough year for Northwestern at the J. They went 7-8-1 at home, but over the course of 2022 to 2024, they were 44-2 at home. They won 41 consecutive home games at the J. This was a team that was so dominant at home. There is a true home environment for that Northwestern team that is just not going to be there this year. And we've seen them struggle on the road, and struggle away from home so far to start this year. And I'm kind of worried about what this team looks like in Big Ten play without, a J environment.
I will say another one of my honorable mentions. I almost brought up Kate Drohan as an honorable mention because, as legendary as of a coach as Kate Drohan is, I think both of us have been noticing some curious decisions so far with lineup decisions, with pitching decisions. And I think the sooner that Northwestern chooses to slim out some of their roster, and you talk about basketball comparisons, and you make that 11-man rotation down to 8 in the playoffs, Northwestern's going to need to do that soon because there have been some blow-up innings from the circle, and there have been some weirdly timed at-bats, and I get it's early in the season. You want to develop young players. You want to see what you have. You want to just see who's hot. And that said, Northwestern has missed out on a lot of opportunities for some ranked wins early on, and already 3 weeks into the season, it feels like the Wildcats have their backs against the wall. Another honorable mention before I get to my number one. I said I don't like talking about second pitchers, but Natalie Cable for UCLA. Taylor Tinsley can't do anything. It looks like Natalie Cable is the one who's second in command. It's been a tough start to the season, almost a 6 ERA in over 24 innings, batting average against over 300. And just I'm waiting to see that stabilize because she's going to be an important factor for the Bruins this year. But my number one, I said I was thinking about talking about an Indiana pitcher. Instead, I'm going to talk about an Indiana hitter, but it's going to be an Indiana hitter for Michigan. Indiana Langford is my number one most important X factor. I see you smiling. You saw it.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there.
Last year for the Wolverines, Indiana Langford led the team with a 406 batting average, a 487 on base percentage, not a ton of power, but just consistently getting on base, had 15 stolen bases. And right now, she's missing time. She's hurt. She got hurt during opening weekend, hit by pitch on her hand, and she'll miss a few weeks. Hopefully, will be coming back soon. And she is just so important for this team in terms of setting the table, especially with the power that Michigan has displayed early on this season. So important on the defensive end, on the infield at second base for Michigan. And the question is just how much of a ramp up is there going to be for Indiana Langford? Because we've already mentioned Indiana, the team. We've already mentioned Penn State. We still have teams like Washington circling, but I think both of us feel like this Michigan team has the potential to be really scary in conference play, and they absolutely need Indiana Langford at her best if they're going to compete in the conference this year. And I think this is a sneaky dark horse to be top 3, top 4 in the Big Ten regular season standings.
Langford, Putz, Conway. There's so much talent on that offense. Not to mention the other bats they have, Lily Valamont. Like that Michigan team, they're legit.
Well, speaking of Michigan, as we look ahead to next week, a bunch of teams going really across the country this upcoming weekend as we go into weekend number 4. Any particular matchups or games that you're looking forward to or want to highlight?
I have 2. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I know you told me to only pick one.
No, that's a limit.
But they're along the same mentality. Michigan, let's stick with them. They've got 2 against Virginia, ranked Virginia team. They beat Ohio State twice this past weekend. I think that's a really good measuring stick battle for the Wolverines off a weekend where they won one against Arizona State. They lost one against Arizona State. It's all about stacking quality wins at this point, and I think that they have a huge opportunity to do that against Virginia. Speaking about Arizona State, though, a team that plays them this weekend is Wisconsin. And I think Wisconsin is like flying under the radar a little bit. It's not like that they've played that many great teams, but they're 11-3. They went 4-1 this past weekend. Their only losses this year against an FAU team, Ohio State, 2 really quality squads, and then the Louisville squad that's always decent in the ACC. I think that game against Arizona State for Wisconsin is a game where it's like, hey, like, where are we at right now? You've played some close games against some really solid squads. Can you get one against Arizona State? If they can, maybe we start talking about them a little bit more.
Well, I want to go to Durham for the Duke Invitational happening this weekend. And we will get a matchup between Northwestern and Ohio State. And no, it won't count toward the conference standings as some of these weird tournament early season matchups often don't. But I think maybe outside of Oregon, who we've also talked about a lot, Northwestern and Ohio State are maybe the two teams who are most feeling uneasy right now about the way the seasons have started. Both have played very high levels of competition, admittedly. Both have really missed out on chances to build their resume. And I'm not going to say it's a loser leaves town match. It's obviously way too early in the season for that. But there's some urgency for both of these squads to get right and fast. And I think that will be a really, really telling matchup between these two teams who right now are sitting near the bottom of the Big Ten standings. And these are teams who have been pretty model programs in the Big Ten for the last few years and probably expected to be right near the top of the standings. And in addition, for both these teams, I mentioned a lot of losses early in the calendar to ranked opponents. They'll both get to play Duke, who is a really good squad this year. Both get 2 games against Duke. And especially for a team like Northwestern, you're running out of resume boosting opportunities. You have a series with Oregon later in the year, but maybe Oregon's not quite what we thought going into the season. So both of these teams have big, big weekends ahead. And there's a chance that if one of those squads goes 1-4 this weekend, we're just kind of ready to write them off as a non-tournament team.
And that's just means that the pressure's on. It just means the pressure's on, and that's why it's certainly a game to watch. I think that, though, when we did come into the season, we were talking about those two teams as, okay, these teams are clearly in this middle tier. We have a ton of question marks, and that's just what's happened on the field so far.
And then finally, as always, the best thing we saw in the Big Ten this week. Adam, kick us off. What stood out?
I got to go out to the Bruins, man. This team is awesome. They are so fun. First weekend of the season, they sweep the weekend. They hit 23 home runs. Then they go down to Clearwater. We're like, okay, they're still a top 25 team. They're just not going to be as good as maybe we thought. And then this weekend, they're like, no, we're back. Go to the Mary Nutter. You get 3 top 25 wins. They go 6-0. Jordan Woolery and the Bruins hit 14 home runs on the weekend. And yes, I say Woolery because she's up to 10 home runs and 36 RBIs, 17 of which came this past weekend. She had 17 RBIs in 23 plate appearances, and she walked 3 times as well. So 20 at-bats, 17 RBIs, basically averaging an RBI an at-bat. That's ludicrous. It's ludicrous what she's doing. And then, yeah, Megan Grein as well. Just casually hitting 529, 11 homers, 26 RBIs. Big win against Auburn, big win against Duke, huge win against South Carolina, and you beat up on Texas A&M. This Bruins team, for me right now, they're back as the number 1 team in the Big Ten.
I feel like one of these episodes in the next few weeks will probably do some sort of a mid-season awards check-in, and the Bruins absolutely have 2, maybe the 2 leading candidates for Conference Player of the Year. It has been unbelievable what they have done. I'll go to the other end of the Big Ten power rankings and shout out some great ball that was happening this weekend for Illinois. Addie Kitty, you like to talk about the big home runs. I like to talk about amazing fielding. And Addie Kitty roaming back from second base, reaching back behind her head, contorting her body awkwardly to make an amazing catch against North Carolina State. I just love highlight plays. I love the Sports Center top 10 shout outs. So that always catches my attention in a weekend where, frankly, there wasn't a ton to be watching because of a lot of these games not being aired. But that play made air. I got to see that one, and that was pretty awesome. But that wraps us up. Next week, we'll be already talking about previewing the Big Ten Conference slate. It's already moving along fast, but for now, follow us on Twitter, Bloops Barrels, and on Instagram, Bloops and Barrels, signing off and looking forward to some more Big Ten softball action. Thank you for tuning in to Bloops and Barrels.